Ryan? Okay. All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the December edition of the Land Acquisition and Management Program Board meeting. And we have a very streamlined agenda today, so it should be very, very efficient and hopefully very productive. We're just going over a lot of the work that we've scored over the last several months in table format. And we'll be going over the usual administrative minutes and that type of thing.
Hello?
Good afternoon. How y'all doing?
Okay.
Hi, Mr. Slavin. We just got started, so your timing is good.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'll put y'all on mute until you're ready to hear from me. How's that?
Fine.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time we'll open to the general public comment for items not on the agenda.
Oh, then you're ready for me. Okay. This is Ed Slavin, StAugustGreen.com. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the board for all your work the last year. Looking forward to your all discussing at your next meeting, hopefully, with Commissioner Dean, the need for a St. Augustine National Historical Park and National Seashore, and I will be addressing that on Monday in my testimony again to the Florida legislature, to the St. Johns County legislative delegation. And you read the testimony, you've seen it, you've got it in your records. I'm sure it's near and dear to your hearts too. And I've been saying the same thing at County Commission more or less since 2006, but the idea dates back to 1939 when the mayor of St. Augustine at the time proposed it, and two senators and our congressman at the time proposed it in Congress. And I think we can do this, and I think we need to do it soon, because when you look around us and the cultural resources that are being destroyed and the environmental heritage that's being destroyed, what's left? Well, Henry Dean and one of your board members, when they were at the Water Management District, helped to acquire about 70,000 acres of land in two counties.
You might want to ask if he's still there.
Ed, can you hear us?
Are you still there? We seem to have lost your audio.
Travis, was he driving?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Shows that we're still connected, but
Okay, well, we can, if he comes back on, we'll pick back up.
okay.
I think we had, Jane, you had something?
Yeah.
Take it away.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. My first time here at a LANT meeting, and proud to be here. We were very supportive of getting this agency back up and running after a long hiatus, so I'm really pleased to see all of you here. 1,000 Friends of Florida, sure. Jane.
Could you, just identify yourself and who you're with, please.
Absolutely,
Okay.
Jane West. I am the Policy and Planning Director for 1,000 Friends of Florida, and I've provided you some information. We basically are the state's leading nonprofit on smart growth advocacy and conservation. And I spend the entire legislative session in Tallahassee advocating for these issues, including the full funding for Florida Forever. So it's really critical that this program here in St. Johns County, given the incredible growth rate here in St. Johns County, that we get those conservation lands properly identified. If they have ecological function, if they have connectivity, we need to identify those corridors and acquire them as soon as possible. This is a game where you have to move quickly, because timing is everything. If we don't acquire these parcels now, they are simply going to get more expensive in the future and are going to be harder to leverage the state dollars that hopefully you can obtain. I want to let you know that our organization supported 5 ballot initiatives this past midterm election throughout the entire state. You would not believe the overwhelming support that these ballot initiatives for land acquisition have been. They're incredibly popular. With ratings, for example, of 78% in Indian River County, Nassau County was 68%. Just staggering percentage of voters throughout the state of Florida really value land acquisition and conservation. So this program is really critical. The other hat that I wear is I'm a commissioner for the St. Augustine Port Waterway and Beaches Commission. And we, at the beginning of my term 2 years ago, did set aside $1.4 million in reserves, and that money has been leveraged properly with St. Johns County for the acquisition of the Genovar property. I want you to know that we're out there and we've got funding that you can potentially use. So I would encourage coordination between our two agencies so we can maximize those land acquisition dollars. And I'll stop talking now, but it's a pleasure to be here and keep up the great work.
Well, we always appreciate people that show up with money. That's a very good thing for our board. Yeah, yeah. Was there any other?
Did anyone have any questions? Did anyone have any questions for me? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Mr. Slavin, about a third of the way, we got part of what you said, but then you disappeared. You went dark and quiet on us.
Maybe somebody hit the mute button. Please don't hit the mute button. Well, let me go back and say what I was trying to say. We need to protect our cultural resources. We need to adopt the National Park and Seashore. And yesterday, the Cultural Resources Review Board rightly questioned who was going to be giving advice to the county on protection of cultural resources, because they ran off 4 cultural resources coordinators in a row, including Mr. Asner. And everybody who spoke at the CRRB meeting yesterday supported Mr. Asner, and they were mystified as to why he'd been run off. And he has a pending IG complaint. The county commissioners have been asked to look at it, and I sent.
Mr. Slavin, can you hear us? I saw your hands, Ryan. You didn't hit the mute button. I was watching him. Are you able to text him and tell him that he's breaking up, or?
Yeah, I mean, let's go home. Hey, Ed, we're not getting your comments. It's breaking up, or you're just disappearing. So I just have you on my cell phone on speaker.
Okay, shall I try it again?
Yeah, I think you can speak just in the phone. I believe everybody can hear you.
Okay, hello everybody.
Okay.
Ed Slavin, St. Augustine. I wanted to commend you for your work. Wanted to thank you for everything that you can do to help us with the National Park and Seashore. Hopefully you can schedule it for a presentation before the board, maybe at your next meeting, like I've been asking for a year. It includes 70,000 acres of the proposal of current government-owned land, which was acquired by the government, by one of your board members, and Henry Dean, when Henry was the head of the St. Johns River Water Management District. And when you look at what's going on around us with all the destruction of cultural resources and environmental heritage, what's left? What's left is the St. Augustine National Historical Park and National Seashore, and we appreciate your support. I know Henry supports it, and he hopes to be at your next meeting. He's had chemo, and he's doing better. Anyway, I wanted to commend to your attention what the CRRB said yesterday about Mr. Asner. They raised concerns about the manner of his being forced out, and he's the 4th cultural resources coordinator who's been forced out by St. Johns County. Apparently the commonality is that if somebody does their job too well, administration raises eyebrows and does what Judge Lippman called flyspeck and nitpick it, and forces him to resign. But Mr. Asner has a complaint pending before the Inspector General of St. Johns County. He's been in touch with his commissioners, and everybody in CRRB who spoke yesterday, whether public comment or people on that board, support Mr. Asner, and none of the questions that I asked were answered by the staff. They basically asked Mr. Asner to make false statements and to withhold information from the CRRB. And the most inculpatory thing is that Mike Roberson and people working under him are afraid of scaring off developers, and they don't want to enforce the Land Use Development Code as written. And that is totally unacceptable. So I would commend your attention doing what my first-year government professor at Georgetown, Valerie Earl, God rest her soul, said that what Congress did best was to raise eyebrows, ask questions, demand answers, and expect democracy. And we expect that Mr. Asner should be reinstated, and he needs to be back there advising you on cultural resources. And until such time as you have a cultural resources coordinator, let me ask the attorney if she's present, is it proper for the LAMP to make any recommendations to the county that are half-baked because they're not based on recommendations on preservation of the cultural resources? information, it might be better to delay a decision just one more month and have a cultural resources coordinator with you.
Mr. Slavin, Mr. Slavin,
You can choose between these wonderful properties if you don't know what you don't know.
Mr. Slavin, this is Mike Adams, the chair. Thank you for those comments. We tried to keep the best track that we could on your time, allowing 3 minutes during 3 different sessions. I think it probably evolved into 5 minutes. We appreciate your patience with us. We do not have an attorney in the lamp today. Yeah, so nobody can comment on your legal question there, but we appreciate your comments. They will be reflected into the minutes. And we look forward to the next time when you can join us in person.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Was there anybody else on the public side that would like to say a few words in the early part of our meeting?
Are you going to take public comment after each agenda item? Okay, I'll reserve mine, thank you.
Okay. Let's see, do I have to take a motion?
No, we are at public comment, then is there any deletions?
Okay, we'll
or
go into the
additions?
minutes then.
No, yes, the
Yeah,
minutes.
okay.
Approval of meeting minutes.
Okay, so you should have a copy of the meeting minutes. Ryan sent those out ahead of time, advance, so we could take a look at them. Does anybody have any changes or comments to the meeting minutes?
I would move approval.
Okay. Wayne Flowers makes a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second? Any discussion? So be it. These minutes are accepted, Ryan. All right. Then we have a very concise agenda in front of us here. 3 items. And take a look at that. That's what we're going to be talking about. Do we have any discussion or thoughts, or do I have a motion to approve this agenda, and we'll move right into it?
I'll move approval of the agenda.
Okay.
Second.
Second? Any discussion? Anybody opposed? We'll approve this agenda then, Ryan. All right. So let's go on to agenda item number 1. Does everybody in the public have something to look at?
I can share.
Yeah, sure. I can share.
Okay.
I know.
So Ryan did an amazing job here. He's provided us with 2 tables. You'll see the one table that's not shaded. It has the 6 subject properties that we've been working on with each of our scores. So it gives you an idea on where we ranked out and then what the total score is there on the right-hand column. The second one is a little bit more details on each property, like the owner, parcel ID number, acreage, evaluation score, and any comments there in the far right. So Ryan, this is a good job. This really helps us see.
May I?
Oh, of course, Irene.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had a question about the ranking, because since Mr. Adams recused himself from one of the properties, then that gets added in as a 0, which to me does not seem right. It should be an average of all the scores. That, to me, is the best way to resolve that. And, you know.
So,
and the
so
other-
are you suggesting rather than divide it to do, you're wanting an average rather than a total score?
Well, no. So what I did was, rather than put you as 0 for the County Road 13 McCullough Creek
Yes.
property, I created an average of all of our scores for that property only, which comes out to 59.
And then add that in for
Well, essentially,
And
you would
add
average
that
extra
all
score.
the scores.
That's
Add that in.
And essentially rank them based on the average,
Yeah.
which I agree, I think is a fair way to do it.
Yeah.
Rather than a total score?
Yeah.
Well, a total score is okay as long as your score is the
Everybody's
average
putting-
of all our scores.
I was suggesting simply averaging the scores.
Okay, that, yeah.
And in that case, you divide by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Well,
Either
let's
8 or
see
9.
6, or whatever, instead of.
Yeah.
But in the case of the McCullough Creek, you need to add in that extra average score in order to get the full average.
Well, there's 2 different, we're talking about 2 different.
Well,
Okay,
each one
I'm
has an
sorry.
average, yeah.
She's talking about average all the scores and then put that number into, for, essentially for Mike. I'm suggesting.
To then get a total.
Yeah, I'm suggesting
Got it.
That's
create an
fine.
average for each one of the scores.
And rank them that way.
Yeah.
Rank them by the averages.
Right, so what I have for that, I did that too. So the McCullough was 59.1, the County Road 13 North was 53.1. I know decimals are in here, but that's how averages work out. The Anastasia Lakes property was 36.1. The County Road 13 South property was 34.6. And 600 State Road 13 North was 32.9. And 4405 State Road 206 was 24.1. Those are my calculations for the averages.
So it essentially worked out the same way, other than flipping the first two.
Yeah,
Right?
right. True.
Yeah.
The ranking is the same,
Yeah,
but the first two
Yeah.
are flipped.
Well, I guess, mathematically or analytics, however you want to do it, as long as we're consistent every time we score it. I mean, we can do totals or we can do an average. I think you just demonstrated that it works out pretty close to the same thing.
Oh,
So, I don't know, any discussion on this? Wayne,
Well,
thought?
I mean, I'll make a motion in a minute, but I was going to suggest perhaps is there any just general discussion on the rankings and any additional discussion, I guess, that anybody wants to have on the properties, maybe any new insights gained before we put them into a final.
Yeah, that's actually further down in the agenda, so
Okay.
we're definitely going to be discussing it.
Okay.
Maybe Irene, this is all really good attention for us, and let's talk about these things a little bit. And I think the scoring works out to the same, whether we average it or we do a total. It's just that when somebody has to be excused and not score, then the first two just flip flop. But they're both ranked really high, so.
Well, I don't know that that's correct, right? I mean, aren't we missing potentially 70 points from your recusal? So an average makes more sense.
Yes, so it shortcuts to that answer. Or if you took specifically for that property, took the average and then added that in for a total score, then you'd be looking at.
It's still going to have to end up the same result.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, let's table this for the moment, and Wayne will get into some discussion further down in the agenda here and see where this leads us. But as far as me sitting in my chair, I don't really care how we score it, because I believe, as you just demonstrated, it's going to work out to the same thing.
And, sorry, one more comment. if I
Absolutely.
may. And I hated to miss last meeting when we finally had scores to discuss and all of that, so I apologize. But in my scoring, and this may have come out, but there were questions in certain categories that I tried to be consistent in either not ranking completely or, so my scores may be on average lower for all the properties than everyone else's if you filled it out fully, just because there were a couple categories that I was unsure on how to evaluate. So just so that that's out there in terms of looking at everybody's rankings, I just wanted to share that. But in creating the averages, it should all, if we are evaluating based on the averages, then my lower scores will all just proportionally impact each of the scores. So I think that's a balanced, fair way to come to the same conclusion. Does that make sense?
It does, and we have other people here that maybe score higher for whatever reason, and that's where the
Yep.
averaging comes in. So
Just wanted to
yeah,
clarify
well,
for
thank
the
you.
sake of
Thank
not
you.
being
Yep.
here
Yep.
behind my scores last meeting.
Okay.
But we could put your scores in this table as well, if that's the board's desire. I mean,
You mean if he
His
changes
scores are in
you
this.
weren't here.
His
Oh, they
scores are in this
already
table.
Yes,
Yeah,
they were-
he
so
relayed
I-
them to us.
Okay, good.
Yep, I had turned them
Right,
in. I just,
right. Okay, good.
relative to everyone else, my scores may be a little bit lower. But
Okay.
anyway.
Okay, yes, they
Yeah,
are in here.
okay.
So you, just to clarify, so his scores got turned in before the meeting?
Yeah.
Okay,
Anticipating not being here.
okay.
Okay, so that's agenda item 1. It's basically just identifying the properties that you see on these two tables here with the individual scores from all of us, and then more details on each of the properties. We'll move into agenda item number 2.
Well, I mean, let's wait a minute. Item 1 is finalization, so I'm assuming either by consent or by motion, we're going to establish what the rankings are. The final rankings.
Finalization of scores and rankings. Well, we have the rankings here. I guess with your averaging method, the first 2 flip.
Well, let me take a step.
Yeah.
An emotion, yes.
I would move first that in order to ensure that all properties are scored uniformly, that we create an average for those who did score for each property, so that we have an average score for each property for purposes of ranking. That's a motion.
I would second that.
Okay?
And that would be essentially the numbers that Irene read off to us.
Right. Okay, we have a motion on the floor. And all in favor? Any
If I
discussion?
could discuss, just real quick, and no offense to Irene, should we confirm the math that's behind those numbers, just to double check and make sure?
Probably.
It seems to iron out,
Yeah.
like we would anticipate, just.
But the motion really, we can check the math.
Yeah,
The motion
that's right.
For a method.
Yep.
And yes, I agree with that, as long as we're keeping both the total and the average as part of our scoring decision. Because we're just gonna be putting forth our top 5, right? And we may wanna move things around, not necessarily based on these numbers.
I think that's right.
Well, I think the numbers kind of give us a quantitative rationale behind the ranking. I don't know if we need both. I thought we were trying to decide, do we want to do a total score or do we want to do an average score? Or do we want to do both? Are you suggesting, Elizabeth, that we have both on there?
Well, and I'm starting to think about the averages, and if we're gonna have some significant outliers, I don't know, I'm just
Yeah.
thinking through that.
We're-
For this purpose, we have one property that's switched, it's not gonna make a huge difference.
Thought?
The other place my mind goes, and to clarify, we have a scoring system, that spits out whatever the results are. But then, based on discussion around any certain property, in our recommendation that goes to the board, to give a scenario for the sake of clarity, even in the current ranking where McCullough Creek is second in the total number, for whatever reason in our discussion, we say that's actually the one that we really want to go at. Now that we've looked at it, talked about it, how does everybody feel? We're unified in going towards acquiring that property first. Do we rank them in that regard?
Well, I think we need to clarify something first, that, again, my understanding is our task 1 is to produce a ranked list of 5, at least 5, I think it's 5 or at least 5, I'm not sure.
5.
Yes.
Properties that the county commission then would take up and decide, I guess with input from county staff, on a process for proceeding through that list, either deciding to get appraisals and or have discussions about a deal or whatever. I think, Holly, what I hear you saying is that we're going to say which one they're going to talk, how the county staff's going to do that task, I guess. And I'm not sure that's our role. I'm curious about that. In fact, I've got that on my list to talk about. But
Yeah, that's
and
what
maybe we're talking past each other, I'm not sure.
Add
But,
some information.
and part of my point before we started on this path was, do we want to talk about any changes or any new insights or whatever people have about these properties, was with the idea of, are we looking at changing, we've got scores, And, that kind of sets an initial list and, before we say, bless it and send it to the county commission, is there any additional discussion that anybody wants to have on that list? And maybe that's what you're.
Essentially, yes. So like we have, let's say we have our 5 that are gonna score there to be in the top 5. Is it just that we're going to directly then pass the top 5 numbers, top 5 properties and say, here's our recommendation? Or is there sort of the secondary step of, here's the top 5 that we've just ranked, then let's turn that over to any more additional information or, education that may swing us to say, actually, we're gonna switch the order to 2, 4, 1, 3, 5 or something.
Yeah, Jan wanted to make a couple comments, and then we'll come back to that, Wayne.
Great.
Once you all do rank a final list, Mike will be taking that to the Board of County Commissioners on your behalf, and we would encourage you to attend that meeting as well, because this is your all's list. And so you would be able to respond to the Board of County Commissioners if they had additional questions. Mike will be able to say, oh, the reason we put number 3 as our first choice is because of the value and the location or the dollar figure or whatever it happened to be. So there will be some discussion by you, the board, in front of the Board of County Commissioners. And then when it goes to the board, they also have the ability then to say, yeah, I think we want number 4 anyway,
Yeah.
For whatever reason. Maybe, again, it was the cost value or the fact maybe they're going to offer to throw some money in or something. So
Got it.
it's going to be a little bit more fluid than I think than a fixed list.
And again, the bottom line is, we're presenting a recommendation. The commission ultimately decides
Takes action.
what to do with it at that point, after we make a recommendation. I would point out also that the ordinance says that we're supposed to choose by supermajority, 6 out of 9 of the entire board, the top 5 candidates. So we got 6 people here today, so it's going to require a unanimous vote. Not encouraging anyone to dissent.
Yeah, and I remember this discussion, I think it was a meeting too, and I remember talking with Holly about this, because we had this back and forth about, does the result of the ranking matrices dictate the properties that go before the commission? And then we say, well, not necessarily. I distinctly remember that conversation in like meeting 2, could have been meeting 3, and I don't know that we ever fully hashed it out, but my understanding from what we're doing here is we're possibly going to use an average just to rank them, but then again, that doesn't necessarily convey exactly what we're bringing to the county commission. Even though number 6 may fall at number 6, we may pick 6 as one of our top 5. I don't feel strongly either way. I would just say, generally speaking, if you are ranking the properties based on criteria and they fall to the top, you would think that naturally those would be the ones that you want to bring to the county commission. So the list really shouldn't change a whole lot, but procedurally, if we want to pick, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and not 1, I don't see any real big issue with that. I think that's probably fine and consistent with the ordinance.
Well, getting back to the motion on the floor, and my purpose in making that motion was simply step 1 to say, for purposes of this ranking, we'll use averages.
Yes.
And then, my next motion would be, and that would be the subject of discussion, is that we, submit this as our list to the county commission. And at that point, I would think of the discussion of, do we like this list, or, do we like the ranking, would be when we come back and say, okay, well, I'd really like us to look again at the Anastasia Lakes property and talk some more about that. So again, I'm going back to this as a way of saying motion 1 is just, kind of a simple question. It doesn't necessarily get us to the end point, but it just says for purposes of the ranking, we'll use averages as opposed to total scores.
Okay, well, let's go one step at a time here, rather than try to tackle the whole
That's
thing.
where I
Sure,
should
go ahead.
A point of clarification, so when, because we'll fix it, do you want us to use Irene's method of averaging and then putting that score in for the recused score, or just averaging straight across?
I'll make my motion to average across,
And I
not to
second
insert
that.
an average score
Yeah.
in the whole.
Okay.
I would second that.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor of that? Anybody opposed? Okay, that's the way we'll go in the future. Now, as we talked about, and Ryan said at the onset here that we have a January 17th date where we're meeting before the commission with our results here. And I would like to I would like to close our meeting today with a solid results. I mean, like you're saying, we're all saying this. This is what we're recommending, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, or whatever the numbers are. And we're the technical advisors. They're going to make the final decisions. If they want to flip something around, if they want to move up number 3 to number 1, we did what we're charged with doing. So I would ask each of you to just think about our niche and what our role is on the lamp board, and stay within that lane and do what we're supposed to do, and don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. Now, Wayne, you had a second idea?
It wasn't a second idea. So I'll go ahead and make the second motion, and that would be that we submit to the county commission the list based on the averaging method that we just agreed to as our list for 2022 or 2023, I guess.
And I think before I take a second or any discussion, we should clarify that we need a majority of everybody saying, yes,
No, we need unanimous.
oh, yeah, okay, unanimous, excuse me. So we need all of us to agree that this is what our final score is going to be.
Well,
Right?
it's essentially, it's a list, a ranked list. And I mean, again, we can accompany scores with it, but basically, as I read the ordinance, we're supposed to submit a list of 5 by rank, the top 5 ranked.
Okay, so, excuse me a second.
Yeah,
Yep.
please.
So it would be 1 through 5 on our table here that you're all looking at. 1 through 5, the way we stand now, and we have to have a unanimous that we all agree on this, and I'm going to take a motion here in a minute that if we all agree on it, after any discussion, and that's how we're going to do it. Let's not make it any more complicated
I'm
than it
making
needs
the
to be.
motion for purposes of inviting any additional discussion that we want to have on it. So,
Okay.
not to cut it off.
Yep. Okay. You had a thought?
So,
There's not a second on the motion, so.
yes, if I understand your motion, it at least includes the top 5 ranked that are on our list currently. Are you also affirming the rankings as is, or the possibility of, well, I guess it already got adjusted in the averaging, but I was thinking of the 1 and 2 properties.
Yeah, that would adjust the list.
Yep, that would adjust the list, and so also affirming the recommendation as the rankings stand.
Correct.
With 1 and 2 flipping because of our average method, right?
And 6 would drop off the list.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to continue to, clarity for me is helpful of, there can be a 1 through 5 ranking that we affirm or confirm that in theory either mirrors that same 1 through 5 ranking, or a recommendation to the board could potentially adjust those top 5 slots.
Okay, I'm not sure which.
Not necessarily this time, but in general. Like if it spits out with the top 5 properties, but in our discussion, post sort of the ranking process and the averaging, we come to conclusion that actually, property 2 or property 3 is actually our highest recommendation for the property to acquire. Then could our ranking and our recommendation not mirror each other?
I'll be willing to give my viewpoint, but again, I'm just one board member.
Well,
That's what I was trying to clarify.
yeah, as I'm trying to understand that, I mean, we have to have one list.
Yep,
You know, we can't go to them with two different lists, but today, what we come out of here is, we have 1 through 5, and as we're gonna do before we decide as unanimous if this is what we like, somebody might say, you know, number 4, I think that should be number 3. And then that person has to say why. That person has to convince the rest of us, okay, we'll support that. But you know, I mean, we kind of already did it with our scoring kind of thing, so. But I know things change, you know, I suppose you may have visited the property over the last month and you fell in love with something and you feel strongly about it and you want to bring that in front of us, which is fine.
well, in your scenario that you painted answered my question of, we may come back, the rankings may be 1 to 5, but then we still have the ability to influence the board to say, actually, it's property 2 is at the top of our list, and here's our recommendation that we're gonna take to the board.
Yeah, as long as we don't get in a situation where we're like 2 to 5 in a vote and stuff like that, and then we can't make our January 17th deadline with our list. I want to close out of here today at 4:30 with a list.
Yep, I hear you on that.
As far as the ordinance goes, I don't know that we have to actually rank them to the Board of County Commission. It just says top 5, so we could send it to them in no particular order if you think that's of value. I mean, they're making the decision anyway, so they're gonna rank them however they want. So I don't know if there's a whole lot of value in us, I mean, maybe there is, in ranking them ourselves and saying, hey, here's our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if that causes anybody heartburn, I mean, I think we could send them in no particular order as well.
I would think it's more helpful to have them ranked for the board to react to.
It just says ranked as below, but I'm not sure what
But
it's
it doesn't say what below
referring
what.
to.
It doesn't
Yeah.
say what's below, what ranking means below, but it does say rank.
Ryan or Jan, do either of you have any thoughts on, as Travis is saying, do we just go in and say, okay, here's our top 5, they're not in any order, but these are our top 5?
Well, I will say that the ordinance does use the word rank and ranking twice, even though it does say as ranked below, and then there's
No below.
I would think
nothing
that'd be most
below.
helpful
Right.
for them
I
to
think,
react.
though, that
Yeah.
demonstrates in their thought they were thinking to rank.
They want some values, yeah, to consider.
And also especially since we only had 6 properties that we were considering,
Right.
you know, the ranking of the 5 becomes more important. If there were 30 properties and we were picking 5, I guess the ranking would not be as critical.
So can we all agree on, we want to show our scores? Our
I don't
average
think there's
score?
anything wrong with doing that.
Yeah. Elizabeth, isn't that what you said? You thought it would be helpful for the commission to see what we decided as a board, our
Yeah,
scores?
I think we should absolutely have
Yeah.
access to our scoring and ranking. And I do think a ranked list needs to be presented.
I'm kind of thinking, Ryan and Jan, unless you had any other thoughts, I mean, this one table, this is very concise and it gives a lot of details. I think this could be part of the presentation
Exactly.
to the board, and it does have our score on it. And if we want to have the total score, or if we want to have the average score, I guess we decided on the average, right? So that'll be changed to the average score on there. And the first 2 would flip, as we've demonstrated.
In the ranking. And then they would still have access to information that you recused yourself on a certain property. 'Cause
Right.
that would be in there as part of the scoring.
Well, again, if I may speak up, just to, for the process of when it goes to the Board of County Commissioners, there will be a staff report in there which will have some text that explains what happened during the meetings to get to this point. It'll be brief. Mike will be doing the presenting as well. All of this information we'll probably use as a package also to go to the Board of County Commissioners so they can review what you all reviewed for the properties. So the Board of County Commissioners will have all of that additional information too.
Okay, well, that all sounds good. So where are we? Do you have
I
a
made a
first?
motion to get second. I'm gonna let somebody else make a motion.
Did it get seconded?
I don't think it
I
did.
don't think it got seconded. I would second.
Wait a minute, there's been so much discussion, I forgot what the motion was. Can you repeat that?
I'll repeat the motion.
Okay.
The motion would be that we present as our ranked list, the list that we just, with the method we've just approved using averages, be presented to the board with those top 5 as our ranked list.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion?
I have a question on that motion. So are you saying we're making a decision on the method, or are we making the decision on actually
We
sending the properties to the county commission?
The reason I broke it into 2 motions was first for the method to be established for creating the ranking. And then the second one was that then having chose that method, that be, the list based on that method be presented to the board as our ranked list of 5.
So the first motion, the motion we're voting on now is just saying we're going to take the average the top 5 properties based on their average, as that's how this land board's going to operate, and that's what's going to dictate us sending it to the county commission. Is that what you're saying?
I think so, that's going to be the list. Now, again,
But that was different from what you were saying, Holly. Because
Well, yeah,
right?
if we do end up going that route, then that just tells me, before we finally solidify our rankings, we need to know that they have that consequence, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so, we need to know that average, that it spits out, so before we finalize our ranking numbers, we really need to know that that's what we intend to do.
and I don't have a problem with that. And again, like I think I said a minute ago, my purpose in making the first motion was to invite anybody to say, well, hey, I want to go back and look at this again.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay, any further discussion? So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, so,
And that's because I thought we were going to say we would not necessarily pick from the top 5 average properties. We could possibly select 6, right? Is that not what we're saying now?
it says 5 in the,
The ordinance says 5.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying that motion was just to say the top 5 average properties are the ones we're sending to the county commission. That was the motion, right? But I thought the discussion and the consensus we didn't take a vote, but I thought the consensus was that if we wanted to select number 6, as a board, we would still have the discretion to do so. I don't care so much, but I thought what I was hearing from the discussion was that we wanted to reserve the right to pick number 6 potentially, even if it averaged lower.
Well,
But I guess that is not the vote.
Yeah, and the way that I interpreted the motion was, for the purposes of the January commission meeting, we are ranking them, in line with how the averages lined out and saying 1 through 5, and that is what we're taking to the board. I did not take it beyond just that purpose.
Right, that would be
Yep.
it.
Okay.
okay, so we can go with a, what was it, 5 to 1?
We can't because.
It has to be
the list
unanimous?
has to have six votes. So, because we only have 6 people here, that means it has to be unanimous. That's the way I read the ordinance.
Well, wait, we're not voting
you'd
on the
like-
list, are we?
That's what the
That's what
motion
the
was.
motion was.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I think there's a lot of confusion. I voted
Okay,
no
I'd like
because-
Travis to explain what he would like to do before we get to a vote
Okay,
for the
yeah.
final list.
Okay, well, number one, so I guess I have a question maybe of staff is, we're making these decisions on how procedurally things will work. There were some procedural things decided last meeting. Where does that go? It goes off into thin air, or is there an administrative document that these decisions we're making as a board get recorded?
The minutes is the recording of your all's meeting. The ordinance does set out your process. And the process, as we said earlier, does use the word rank a couple times, and it is top 5. How you have established yourselves is doing this criteria and filling out the sheets to get to this point. So all of this is memorialized, all of your all's ranking sheets, and we keep as public record.
Right, so at last meeting, I had made a motion which carried that said everyone would come into the meeting with rankings compiled before the meeting and they would be modified during the meeting. Where is that memorialized?
In the minutes of the meeting, and then,
In fact, we
That's-
did spend time discussing each property individually and with an opportunity to change scores. That's what I took as
That's what I thought we
purpose.
did too, yeah.
Right, so what I'm saying though is 2 years down the road, right? You got a new board comes in, there's no administrative document that guides this. There's an ordinance and there's meeting minutes. Do you think that the board member from 2 years from now is going to review those meeting minutes and say, oh, that's how this should be done? Or are they gonna do it some other way, just like the averages, right? We all just made some sort of motion, we all concluded that we should do this by average. It's in the meeting minutes, sure, but again, the board member 2 years from now isn't going to be going through their meeting minutes and saying, oh, yeah, back 2 years ago, they decided that's how this should work. There's a gap in the process, and that's usually reported in an administrative document.
okay, I disagree with the gap, because you have a matrix. You all developed a matrix. That's how you are ranking the items. We can certainly modify this now that we know how you want to have it done, and on all of our documents that are going to be filled out to go to the board, we'll have a notation of what these figures are. You know, we tried to do it here. So we're not done with finalizing things, because you are a new board, you are a young board, so we're all kind of learning as we go on this. So these can certainly be modified. These will be out on the public record. They'll be continued in the Board of County Commissioners' agendas and minutes. But we can modify these documents so subsequent board members will understand these things and your matrix and how you filled out matrices and things like that.
Sure, and I think that's important. I mean, that is what adds value to this program as it's built over time, is we're all adding improvements, and so how is that reported? The other thing that, you know, these are points that still kind of bother me with the entire program, is I think we ranked a few properties last time, and the property owners were not notified. I would think that there would be a step in the process that if I'm volunteering my property to be purchased and it's going to be discussed in a public hearing, that I should have the opportunity to be notified that it's going to be presented before a public audience.
We have
and weigh
contacted
in
every single property owner.
after the fact, after the meeting, correct?
We contacted them before this meeting.
No, I'm saying last meeting, we ranked their properties. That was, we took votes and everything.
But what happened if you dropped a property off? We contact them. We're not going to go to the Board of County Commissioners with a piece of property that somebody doesn't know their property is being offered up. So we made sure we contacted the property owners.
But you didn't do that for the lamp hearing, is what I'm saying. That wasn't done last time. I asked the question
You're
in the
not
meeting.
finalized yet.
But we took a vote. That was their opportunity to be scored, and they weren't heard.
Your finalization is today. Your final ranking is today. So be rest assured that everybody on this list for your final ranking has been contacted. Okay,
Right,
clearly
but-
we're on a different page.
Well,
The question is
when we
how-
discussed their property, and the opportunity was to discuss the particulars of the property, they weren't notified. To me, that, go to any process in the county, land use plan amendment, rezoning, variance, it all works the same. The applicant has an opportunity to be there when the board is hearing their matter.
That's because they're the applicant.
Right,
They're the ones that are asking for that. So of
Right.
course they know about it. So before this goes before the board, and we told them the board date, they've been notified. If you want to do it a different process, we can certainly contact people way early on. You may then have a ranked list that they're going to go, well, you know what, I've changed my mind. It's however you, the board, decide to do it. So set up the process now and just let staff know how you'd like to handle it.
I think that's the normal way of handling it, and I would assume that that's what was done by staff at last meeting. To hear that it wasn't, again, makes me think, is there some sort of procedural manual that needs to accompany this program to guide how it operates. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to overcomplicate it, but at the same time, that seems like a big misstep in my mind. And again,
Well, here is a suggestion. It may not cure your problems today. We can either ask staff or one of us can volunteer to go and create a document that summarizes the process we use this time. And add to it anything that we think was missed that, you know, for 2023, when this same board goes through this process again, can say, okay, well, we want to do this time.
That would be a process that you, the board, would develop
So
and
I'm
create.
suggesting that as a potential way to address
like
Travis's
flow chart.
concern.
Yeah, flow chart would have been, I mean, I think a flow chart would help everybody.
If you all want to design a flow chart, staff will accept it and put it into the process.
But what I do hear being said is they have been contacted prior to this meeting,
Yes.
and we haven't finalized those rankings or our recommendation yet. So had they had interest in advocating for their specific property, they could be here with us today
Or saying
to
county
jump in
the hell
and
out.
make a comment at the front end of the meeting to say, hey, I'm here, I'm representing this piece of property that y'all are discussing today, and here are my thoughts on it. So maybe we want to bump it up a meeting, but at the same time, I think they've notified everyone ahead of our finalization of recommendation. So maybe that appeases you, maybe it doesn't, but
Yeah, I mean, I think.
at least helps.
I think you missed the ball, but it's fine. I mean, I get that this is a way to kind of maybe patch it up afterwards, but, you know, again, we're not necessarily recreating the wheel here. I mean, there's a lot of government processes that work the same way. I mean, just shocking to me that you wouldn't include them, but
So would we be requesting amendments to the ordinance or just,
Not sure what you all need.
yeah, I mean,
For a
like a
process, we
flow
wouldn't
chart or, no?
amend the ordinance, but I think it's in the ordinance that one of the responsibilities of the board is to come up with a process. So it's just not currently in a manual or document form. And then I do just want to speak briefly to the landowner notification comment, because I do agree that it's really important to have the landowners involved early in the process. But my hope is that moving forward, as more people are submitting their own projects to be considered by the board, that we will incorporate that earlier into the process.
I almost think that as it gets popularized, there's going to be more initiative on the individual person to be heard because the list is so long to make it stand out. So again, we're evolving and developing.
Well, although the agenda doesn't appear to speak to this issue, we do have it out on the internet now, out on the web, where you can actually nominate your own properties. And you'll be filling it out, and you're going to be saying if you're a willing seller and actually put a purchase price and that sort of thing. So that will then hopefully provide more detail in the future.
Great. Thank you for taking the initiative to reach out there.
So in moving forward here, how do we want to go as a board on January 17th, when I'm at the podium in front of the microphone in front of the commission, here's our top 5. And you came up with a Band-Aid that says, okay, we've gone through this procedure now for a year. This is what we've come up with. I think this is pretty efficient. It's not perfect, and it's not all-encompassing. You have to realize that what we're doing here isn't all-encompassing. This is just a tool. This is a tool that we're using to give a recommendation to a board. We're not the decision makers on the properties.
Well, and we've had a lot of discussion. I did want to circle back and give Travis the chance if he misunderstood the motion, if that changes his opinion or not. I don't know. But it sounded like you had one expectation of the motion that may have been different than the intent of it, that other people
Yeah, I
understood.
think that was clarified. I mean, I have some additional points of discussion I can, before I'm ready to change my vote. But I don't want to.
So I'm trying to recall where we are on a motion.
Here's where we are.
Okay,
The motion passed 5-1, but in order to make a recommendation to the board, we have to have 6
unanimous.
votes.
Yeah.
So we either continue to work to see if we can get to a point where we can get 6 votes, or we schedule another meeting where our other 2 members can be present.
And make a vote based on that.
To get 6 votes?
3 members, I guess, right here.
Okay, Travis, so what would you like to, what are your thoughts or your discussion with this list?
Well, I guess the other thing I just wanted to understand is how this, we've moved so fast, and, there's multiple times I was saying, I think we need to pump the brakes to make sure we understand actually what we're doing here, but we rushed through with 6 properties. We're about to, based on 6 properties out of thousands and thousands in St. Johns County, we've evaluated 6, and we're saying, county, you pick 5 of one of these 5 properties. I have, as a taxpayer, I have a problem with that. But what I really want to get to is, there's part of the ordinance that says, it's section 8B, and it says, the LAMP shall recommend to the Board of County Commissioners properties acquisition and conservation based solely on the LAMP acquisition and conservation selection criteria and ranking matrices which it has developed and which are approved by the Board of County Commission. And it's more of a procedural question. Has the Board of County Commission approved our ranking matrices?
No, they have not.
So I guess I would feel like, again, we're probably a little bit putting the cart before the horse. I feel like we've done fire ready aim in many regards. I'm not comfortable. I don't think my vote's going to change today.
So we want to schedule another meeting before the 15th?
I think we're gonna have to if we want to take something.
That will not be available because of the timing for advertising.
Agenda, yeah.
Well, advertising to the public.
So where does that leave us at the?
What's our timeline for that?
at The next board? The February commission?
Yes, February.
So that we could meet.
Well, you will have a February meeting, you as the LAMP board. And then it would take at least probably 4 to 6 weeks after that to get on the Board of County Commissioners.
What's our advertising timeline necessary?
We have to give 2 weeks full notice, but then I also have to have a week in preparation and then a week for the record. So typically it's around 3 to 4 weeks.
Jan, could we take a 5-minute break? And I'd like to talk with you. Would that be
Sure.
possible?
Yes.
We'll take 5, everybody. Chill out.
We are still on the January Board of County Commissioners meeting. And as Travis pointed out, he would like the matrix approved by the Board of County Commissioners. So we can advertise and have the matrix approved by the Board of County Commissioners during the January meeting. And we can immediately get on schedule for another Board of County Commissioners date sometime after your all's February meeting, where you can finalize the list, and then that will be presented to the board February, March, in that time frame.
I don't want that done. That's what the ordinance says.
Okay,
It's
well,
important that everyone understands. That's what the ordinance says. That's not what I personally want. That's what the county commission.
I believe I said as you pointed out, but,
Okay.
so for a point of clarification, we can go in January to have the matrix approved. that'll take care of that issue, and then we can move forward at a later date on the ranking.
Okay.
If
Wayne,
you, the board, choose to do that.
Wayne, do you see anything in the ordinance that that
I
might
would
not comply
suggest
with?
that you talk to the county attorney's office in terms of what the ordinance requires in terms of approval by the county commission.
Might I suggest that you give us direction now as staff, with that along with it, because we don't want to miss another date with the board if I am going to have to schedule it. As you can see, it takes some time to get on those board dates.
I will, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask the question too, can we couple it with our recommendation based on the rankings? Like, if this is approved, here is our ranking?
We don't have 6 votes for the ranking.
Today.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering too, it looks like it's 5 weeks to the next meeting. I didn't know if we could pull it off or not, to meet prior to hear the opinion of the rest of the board. To have a quick meeting just for that specific item.
Can we schedule out of cycle like that?
I would have to advertise.
Yeah.
It is an expense to the county, but we could potentially advertise and have another meeting.
In between?
In January.
Well, then that would push you up against your January, if you're going to
It'd probably
keep
be
your
the week right
January.
before the meeting, the BCC meeting. I mean, because it looks like it's 5 weeks out, which is real tight, I understand. I was just
see,
curious if we could
yeah.
pull it off.
I don't think so, because we have to have our staff reports and packages in.
Yeah, turn it in. ahead.
Right.
Yeah, sure. Got it. Sorry, just exhausting all options.
Good thought.
So that's, I think that's going to be our best approach to try to keep this thing moving forward in some aspect at some speed. I'm not happy with this. I wanted results today to go to January 17th. But we'll get it on the next run, and we'll get 6 votes.
I'm sure.
If there's 9 people, we'll get 6 votes.
Yeah. Well, you gotta follow procedure, right? It's an ordinance,
Right.
it's a local law.
Right.
So we gotta do what's proper.
We'll get our 6 votes. All right. Are we good with that?
I think so.
Okay, so we talked about number 2 there. We exhausted it quite extensively. Is there any further discussion on item number 2? If not, I will move to item number 3. Discussion on seeking new properties for consideration by board members. Now, I think Ryan, you had at least one that we decided to table because we felt like we were just going to try to work with the 5 or 6. Is this the time where we might consider that, or do we just want to wait until we get past these 5 or 6?
Well, we have 6 properties that we've evaluated, and we have the top 5 going to the board.
Right.
I don't have any additional properties
Okay.
from that list.
Okay, okay.
This is just a general discussion, and really for a point of clarification for the board, to be able to check, you have the ability to go out and check available properties. You as the board can have public outreach and see what is available out there. Just also for a point of clarification, the county has a real estate department that basically helped us generate this list of 6 properties. So that's how we're getting our lists together. These are willing sellers. A couple of the properties one is the one on 13, came from 2 commissioners. That was the only property that we haven't, early on in the process contacted. So I just wanted to put that out there that, there's a nomination formed currently now on the LAMP board link of the, county's website. So, we can just, as board members, if you're out in the community, you can point people to that, resource and say, if you have any properties that you're willing to provide to the county for this program, that's there. And so I think that's all that I had to add for that discussion.
Okay, great.
Can members of the public speak on this agenda item?
I don't see why not.
Again, Jane West, Policy and Planning Director for 1,000 Friends of Florida. Again, in my capacity as sitting Commissioner for the Port Authority, we have the Parks and Rec Department come to us and report every month. And when they heard about the LAMP program gearing up, their staff was instructed by the Port Authority to pull together a list, identify a list of willing sellers and parcels through the Port Authority's jurisdiction, which is obviously smaller than the counties, of properties that had good ecological value, and then also we had the nexus of there had to be some waterway component, obviously, given our mission. I believe they were working on that list. It would be a really smart place to start, since you've already had taxpayer money go towards paying for employees to identify those parcels. So maybe some communication with Parks and Rec would be a good place to start with identifying new parcels. I agree that just identifying 6 in a county this size, I believe you have 872 square miles. It's just not a lot, and there's a lot that needs protected, and it needs it now. Thank you.
Well, you can certainly observe what we've gone through with the 6 properties, and it hasn't been too efficient yet. We're trying to figure out our best efficient path here, and we hope that in the future we can evaluate 30 properties in a year and really get some land in conservation.
Good luck.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we actually did chat about this again. I think it was meeting number 2 or 3. And if you go back to the recordings, we talked about how do we get interest and where do we find these properties and making a robust program. And I remember you mentioned last meeting about, kind of being strategic, and instead of being reactive, how do we be proactive? I'm all for that, and 1,000 Friends of Florida has awesome resources, I'm sure. So I feel very uncomfortable given the size of our county that we've got 6, one of which a board member had to recuse himself. To me, it feels a little off. I would like a robust program where it's very proactive. I don't see why environmental staff can't identify properties that they know would rank real high and then contact the property owner and say, hey, we would love to buy your property. Your property would rank very high in our matrices, instead of waiting around for a property owner to happen to stroll by and say they want to sell their property to the county. So I wanted to have that discussion. I wanted to have that sort of broad vision and make this a robust program with lots of properties. The task that was kind of pushed on some of us other board members was we need to go fast, and we need to get these approved. And I think we short-circuited the program. I've said this from the very beginning. We short-circuited the program. We are where we're at now. We only have 6, which I feel is embarrassing. And now we're being told we must pick 5 of the 6. To me, that's not how you do things. That's wrong. I'm all for conservation. I don't think you have to have this idea that you can't support, if you support conservation, you have to support the program we've designed. Those two things aren't the same. Remember, George Bush, right? George Bush had said, you're either with us or you're against us. That sort of mentality is not the mentality to have here. You can support conservation, and you can also be against the program as we designed it. And that's where I stand. I'm all for conservation. I wish you all could get my vote, but I feel like we short-circuited the program. I'm embarrassed to say that we only got 6, and then I'm being told that I have to pick from 5 of the 6. So,
Well, Travis,
I'm all for it.
what would you do differently to expedite our procedures? You've been involved with us from the beginning since we reconvened as a LAMP board. We've been soliciting your input, and what have we done wrong that we can't come up with 5? Where you can't vote to support the list that you yourself have voted on? Why can't we do that today?
I had to vote on the list. These were the properties presented at the board. I mean, again, I said from the beginning, we were moving too fast. I was not of the opinion that we had to do it in this process. I did not get the support of the program. I think that's why we find the program where it's at today. And this is your baby. I mean, you didn't get the votes today. I'm sure you'll get the votes when the other few members attend. But from a principle standpoint, I can't support it.
Wayne?
I respectfully disagree and agree to certain parts of what's been said. And I actually came here prepared to say the same thing with the anticipation that we would get through this initial phase. And that was to say, my hope is next year we can be more strategic about looking at properties and actually going out and soliciting properties, perhaps using some of the resources that have been shown to us to think about what do we want to go out and get, not necessarily what's offered, and perhaps use staff to go out and talk to them. Would you be a willing seller? Would you consider this for properties, on those various acquisition maps that are part of the resources that staff provided to us, I think, at the first meeting. That having been said, we do have a task that we've been given. I believe we've done a reasonably good job in trying to fulfill our responsibility. In a perfect world, we would have had more than a year to do it. In a perfect world, we would have had a whole process and ready-made criteria to use for us to do that. We had to develop that. And again, ultimately the county commission will make the determination whether they think any of these properties should be purchased. They all have worth in their own right. So I would disagree with Travis that we've just done a horrendous job here and aren't living up to our responsibilities. I think we have, and I think we've made a very strong effort to do that. Don't disagree that there's a lot more we can do, and I'm hopeful that we will do that in the coming year when we're not having to spend every meeting trying to come up with what our matrix list is going to look like and those sorts of things. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, that's all you have to say about that. Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have any mechanisms at the county to be able to solicit or advertise for proposals to be submitted from the general public, like using the form?
Right now, the form is just available online on the LAMP page.
We could maybe get it out on GTV, like a little public service announcement on
Yeah, can we
GTV,
post
that
it
sort
on
of thing.
Facebook, any of the
Yeah,
social
we have a
media
Facebook
channels?
page, that sort of stuff. Yeah, we
Okay.
can certainly do social
I
media
think
as well.
a way to be able to broadcast the program coming from the county and then places where interested parties can start to pick that up and generate more interest would be very helpful.
I agree.
And are there email lists that would accompany sort of that blast, or can we solicit making one? I don't know, but we have the right to be able to solicit or send via email, but
I'm not sure would have like a comprehensive email list. I mean, certainly organizations could approach the county, and if they wanted to email us or had something they wanted us to look at, we could certainly bring that to you,
yeah,
the
I
board.
mean, maybe that's a place to connect with contacts is, hey, let's work together. Y'all have a list of contacts that people are clearly invested in conservation in the county. Would you be willing to share this information about the board that exists to partner with them?
Yeah, we can
So I think
certainly,
that'd be an effective way to reach out.
I mean, that's great ideas. I think probably ideas that could have even been thought through before we even met as a board. I think part of the problem that we have here as a board is, we're at each other's throats because we're frustrated in some ways, or some of us are at each other's throats, frustrated in some ways because we're not making progress. And I think part of that is because the situation we were thrown in was not ideal, wasn't even very good, and there's nothing holding staff back from conceptualizing this program and putting some structure on it before you threw 7 citizens in a room. And the fact that we have to come up with an idea like, can you put it on the county's Facebook page, it should not take a board member to have to raise that. It's a great point, but it's so basic that it's like, yeah, any program that you're trying to solicit input from residents, of course it should be on the Facebook page. Of course it should be on GTV. Of course it should be on mail lists. But the fact that we're a year into this process and we're having to say that now, to me, again, shows how much lack of preparation and how much lack of structure we were given. And we were thrown in as board members and saying, hey, go do this. And by the way, you've got 2 hours to get it done on a Tuesday every 3 months or 2 months. That doesn't make sense. From a program design standpoint, ask that of citizens. Say, hey, citizens, we're going to let you meet together in a public hearing once every 2 months, and we're going to have you put together this robust program, and at the end of the year, we want your list. The program was doomed to fail from the start. And we've got a technical staff that is trained and in the business of doing this. I think they should show some leadership,
Are you speaking of me?
and I think they should look to other counties, cities, how are these things done, and offer us more resources as a board.
Let's
Well,
just be clear that this is not the only task that we have here as staff. We have been given, just thrown into this just as much as you have on this board. We are doing the best we can. Not only do we have this board, we have the Cultural Resource Review Board, and we have our own jobs that we have to do with reviewing and managing county properties. You, the board, needs to step up a little bit too and make decisions and bring valid things to the table. If you want a matrix, then you could design a matrix and bring it to the board. It's not just up to staff. So you can't sit here and just blame all of this business on staff today. We are doing the best we can to provide resources to you as the group.
I would take responsibility for not having thought of the email opportunity until today. I mean, I'm a board member. I've been in these discussions, and I do think it's our role to work those things out. Now, staff, I can ask staff, hey, resource-wise, how would we go about accomplishing this? But without a directive, I don't know that they're the initiators in this. I think that's why we've been appointed and accepted our appointment. So I just felt the need to say, I could be a better board member, or I could be a better advocate for what we're trying to accomplish here. And I think, again, we are young. We've met 6 times. This is 7, and we have a lot to learn together. And so, am I satisfied with the product where we are? I think I would agree that we would hope that we have a larger list. We would hope that we would have more activism from our citizens in the county. But until we've developed the program and created a system for that, we have to limit our expectation on where we are. But we have a deliverable that we've been charged with, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. So.
And also, I would like to remind you all that we joined this board voluntarily. We weren't thrown into this board, we joined. And also, this board is not a failure. And the products that we have in front of us now are not a failure. It's the best that we've done with what we've had to work with in a short period. And again, I remind each and every one of you that if you don't think you're a good fit on this board, it's okay. It's okay to move on and resign, and we'll fill it with somebody that can maybe do a better job. But if you're losing sleep at night and your blood pressure's going up, it's probably not worth it. So,
I have one question, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir, go ahead.
Chuck Lebanowski, I live over in the Maribel community. Right now, I don't think you have to reinvent the wheel here, because the county right now uses a broadcast system from it's called Neighborhood Bill of Rights. It's automatically, I get hundreds of emails a month from that, notifying me of different things that are going on. So why couldn't that be used? I don't know if you're allowed to use it. Why couldn't that be used to broadcast out, hey, we're looking for some property or whatever? you want to put out there, can that be done?
I can ask about that. Typically, the Neighborhood Bill of Rights is left for development applications that come in, so we can notify citizens, like when a rezoning or
Exactly.
something like that comes in. I could certainly see about that, maybe to do like a one-time shout out.
The email list is already there. I mean, it's already
Right.
been generated, and that would be a good avenue to get the word out. That's my only
I
comment.
can certainly check on that.
Thank you. So on the agenda, I believe we're in the board member reports section. So does anybody have anything that they would like to report on for our board this afternoon?
Not a report, but a question. Does anybody know of any effect that the storms that we've recently had may have had on our properties that we're evaluating? Flooding or erosion or any loss of property? Is that something we would know about? Because yes, since our last meeting, we
A lot of
had
things have
two
happened.
big storms. So it's just something that came to mind.
I think the only one that may have been affected, I mean, certainly there could be minor flooding and stuff like that in all regions of our county during the storms.
Yeah.
But that one, that was the salt marsh, I'm sure it got,
Usually,
yeah.
yeah,
mhm.
probably, but nothing significant that we would need to
Nothing that we've heard.
change our matrix, I would say, so.
Okay, without any more board member reports, we'll move into staff reports. Do either of you two have anything you'd like to report to us?
I don't.
Only that, a reminder that there is also a requirement to develop a conceptual management plan for any property considered for acquisition.
I
This
was
is,
actually gonna mention that.
this is
since
further
we didn't
down.
Have a selection.
yeah, once you have those, properties have been selected for acquisition by the Board of County Commissioners, that's just a reminder that this group is to also generate a conceptual management plan for that property.
And to the extent that we're going to get to that phase, it would be helpful to have, some examples of management plans for properties that the county currently has for conservation or cultural resource properties.
We can certainly provide them now, some examples.
So you say that's in the ordinance, Ryan?
Yeah, it's in the ordinance, and it
So-
can be
so-
very conceptual and.
Okay. I was just gonna ask, to
Yeah,
what level?
It doesn't have to be detail-oriented, and it's gonna change based on the property, obviously, and size and whatnot, and what habitat you're dealing with. For example, you could have an area that needs prescribed burning, or areas that need to be mowed, or, invasive species control, that sort of thing.
Road to be maintained, whatever.
Roadways to, if there's any existing roadways out there. So that's it, and then if any board member wants to entertain topics for next meeting, obviously the one topic about the list is going to be highlighted next meeting.
Biggie.
Yeah.
Oh, for next meeting, I'd like to suggest the National Park and Seashore, and also perhaps for a future meeting after the matrix is established by the BCC, could it be that this board, working with the CRB, might want to have a joint meeting, and could it be that the highest and best use of the limited funds and the LAMP board for this year might be to buy Camrite House? That might the house where Dr. King was going to stay on St. Augustine Beach with the bullet holes. There's a willing seller. He wants to sell the property. There are people who are going to buy it, hopefully some civil rights groups, and they're talking about moving it across the road. But could it be that, even considering all the wonderful properties you have here, that the best property for St. Johns County to buy with the first tranche of funds with LAMP might be Camrite House? And could we discuss that maybe at a future meeting, please, ladies and gentlemen? Thank you.
I would think that we could certainly add that for 2023, that particular parcel.
Thank you, sir.
It's just a house.
On a lot in Atlantic Beach or something like that?
Yeah.
Oh, move the house, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha, okay. All right, any other staff reporting?
No.
Okay. I think if this, oh,
Go ahead. I just said before we adjourn, what's our calendar going forward?
I wasn't going to adjourn yet, but let's talk about that. So Jen or Ryan, can you give us a
Yeah.
timeline?
We're still on for January 17th, correct, Ryan?
Yes.
Okay, so then after that, I mean, we could go ahead and your next meeting will be
It's February, isn't it?
February 14th. The next board date after that will be the
Fall- fall in
21st,
love
but
and
that
come
won't
in
give me
that
enough
date. Yeah,
time.
it's February 14th.
So the 14th, so 1, 2. It'll probably, we probably couldn't get it scheduled until March 21st.
Get what scheduled?
The final,
Okay.
the final list.
To the board?
Recommendation.
board.
Yeah, to the board.
We would consider it at that February 14th meeting.
You would consider it the February 14th.
Okay.
Hopefully you can come to a determination. Then we would have to prepare the staff report, do all the advertising and get that in.
What was that date again, March or April?
It looks like March 21st, if all the stars
I
align
was
and
mainly
everything
concerned about
goes
when
well.
we're going to meet again,
Yeah.
in case we were going to have an early meeting.
And the plan is to go over the matrix at the 17th meeting. Is that what
Present
we've
that
all?
to the Board of County
Right.
Commissioners.
County commissioners.
Yeah.
Are there any action items we need to have, given that we haven't met the deliverable of the ordinance?
I think we can
Something that
update
says,
the
"Please
board.
forgive us."
Yeah. During the January 17th meeting, I think we could discuss how we got to where we are today.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to open it one more time for the couple public members that are out there. Anything else? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You had quite an entertaining show this afternoon.
Yes, well, it was, I'm Steve.
Thank you all for your fine work. Thank you.
The,
Happy holidays.
The County Road 13 North property is my family. And so it was a real pleasure to hear all this. The one thing I would say is that if there was any way you could, we're going to drop off, and this is neither here nor there, I guess, as far as what you folks do and your board decisions are important. But it's going to cause me trouble if the realtor that is handling this is going to drop off in March. And so I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, we're in control up to March. After that, I don't know. And I'm not throwing anything up to try to cause you, I'm just saying if you can make a meeting happen before March with the Board of County Commissioners, it would be a whole heck of a lot easier on me. That's all I gotta say.
Well, you see how it is when we try to get a majority on a unanimous vote. And we have timelines and public notice we have to go through.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I liked his idea over there about having an early meeting between, is that a possibility that?
We
that-
still wouldn't make the noticing requirement.
You wouldn't make it?
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
No, thank you.
Well, I agree. Y'all need more frequent meetings. That's absolutely true. You should be meeting every month.
Thank you for coming.
Happy to be here. Thank you for considering the property. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm good.
Okay. Well, I'll take a motion to adjourn our meeting at about 3:15.
Second.
Did anybody make it first?
So moved.
Okay. All right. You all have good holidays. Be safe.